The paradox of Kharg Island. America's golden handcuffs. There is a bitter paradox that history often brushes over in a few brief lines. Kharg Island, the vital lifeblood of modern-day Iran and the transit point for over 90% of the nation's crude oil, was born from the very hands and technology of the Americans. A legacy of giants. Rewind to the 1960s, when Iran and the United States were still close allies under Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi. In an ambition to transform Iran into a massive gas station serving the West, American energy giants like Amoco brought the most advanced technology of the era to this coral island, which spans less than 6 kilometers in length. Here, they erected massive piers stretching kilometers into the deep sea to welcome supertankers, built storage tanks with capacities of millions of barrels, and deployed a dense network of pipelines snaking across the land and under the seabed. It was a system designed not just for extraction, but to drive a global-scale energy machine. At that time, the U.S. engineered Kharg to be the most efficient oil port in the world. The irony of history, but history has its own ironic way of unfolding. After the 1979 Islamic Revolution, that entire technological legacy fell completely into the hands of Tehran. By 2026, an unbelievable adversity emerged. The United States found itself struggling to find a way to shut off the very oil tap it once helped build. In other words, they are facing off against the optimal designs they created more than half a century ago. This raises a major question. Why can a tiny, isolated island in the Persian Gulf make the world's leading military superpower hesitate? Why does a seemingly easy, fixed, and exposed target turn into a political and economic puzzle with almost no simple solution? An indestructible machine. To understand just how important Kharg truly is, one must first look at its structure. This island is not merely a transit point. It is a giant machine of steel and concrete anchored to the continental shelf of the Persian Gulf. When American engineers laid the first foundations for the Apang, now you are better because of the pain of your mistakes. That makes each new decision. That makes each new decision easier than ever. It is a giant machine of steel and concrete anchored to the continental shelf and concrete anchored to the continental shelf of the Persian Gulf. When American engineers laid the first foundations for the Apollyon Kharg project in the mid-20th century, they weren't just building an oil port. They were designing a system to optimize the flow of black gold from the onshore oil fields of Khuzestan to the global market. The decisive advantage lies in the ideal natural depth around the island. This factor allows massive supertankers such as VLCCs or even ULCCs with a capacity of up to 500,000 tons to dock directly with ease, something most of Iran's inland ports simply cannot accommodate. Strategic overengineering documents from 1970s energy records. The U.S. did more than just support the construction. They directly designed the most critical components on Kharg. Most notable among these is T-Jetty, also known as T-Island and C-Island, an offshore pier system of a scale far exceeding the standards of that time. Thanks to this structure, Iran can simultaneously load up to 10 supertankers with a total capacity of over 6 million barrels per day. This figure is staggering when compared to the country's current production, which fluctuates around 3.2 million barrels per day. That intentional redundancy has become a form of strategic insurance for Iran. Even if part of the pier system is paralyzed, the massive backup network is sufficient to maintain the flow of oil, perhaps not as fast as before, but never completely cut off. It is like a multi-hearted sea monster. If one heart is struck, the others keep beating to pump blood throughout the body. A fortress of interdependence, the presence of Kharg, creates a technical and geographical interdependence. The entire sub-sea pipeline network, connecting the mainland to the island over 40 kilometers away, was an engineering marvel of its time. It was designed to withstand extreme pressure and geological shifts. When the 1979 revolution broke out, and American experts withdrew, they left behind a perfectly functioning operation that the Iranians simply took over. Therefore, destroying an entity like Kharg is not just destroying an opponent's asset. It is destroying part of the energy architecture that the West itself shaped to feed the global economy. The irony reaches its peak when looking at the current defense map surrounding the American-designed oil tanks, RS-300, air defense systems, and indigenous Iranian missile complexes, creating a ring of fire protecting America's own legacy. Kharg is no longer a pure oil port. It has become a symbol of sovereignty and defiance. The meticulous preparation of the Americans in the past inadvertently gifted Iran an economic fortress that is impregnable by conventional force without causing catastrophic ripple effects. Lessons from the style fortress history has proven that this is not the first time Kharg has stood firm against a storm of fire. To understand why Kharg is so resilient, we must look back at the bloodiest period in Gulf history, where military theories about wiping out an oil port were shattered by reality. During the Iran-Iraq War, the island was bombed thousands of times, by Iraq becoming one of the most heavily attacked targets in the modern Middle East. However, a detail often obscured in diplomatic reports is that, within the strategic competition of the time, the U.S. shared certain information with Iraq. Under Saddam Hussein, this data is believed to have improved the accuracy of military operations against key targets like Kharg. From a strategic perspective, this reflected a broader goal: increasing pressure on energy revenue, the key factor sustaining the Tehran government. Yet, the reality of the battlefield told a different story. According to Brookings Institution's studies on the tanker war phase, even as Iraqi Mirage and Super Attendard squadrons repeatedly dropped bombs on the tanks, turning the DHO Persian Gulf sky into a sea of black smoke, for months the oil flow from Kharg was never truly severed. The island displayed an almost absurd vitality. Piers could burn to the ground, tanks could explode, but after just a few hours, Iranian engineers would return the system to operation. The core of that stubbornness lies in the very structure. The Americans designed Kharg is not a single target that can be neutralized by a few precision strikes. It is a decentralized network. When one pier is disabled, the oil flow is immediately diverted to another area. When a pipeline is destroyed, automatic valves and backup systems activate instantly. During the most intense periods, Iran also turned Kharg into an anti-aircraft fortress, combining MIM to 3 Hawk complexes purchased during the Shah's era with low-altitude artillery, making the airspace around the island extremely dangerous for Iraqi pilots. Military historian Pierre Razou pointed to a thought-provoking conclusion. Iraq's failure did not lie in a lack of firepower, but in underestimating human adaptability. Iran developed a near-extraordinary hot repair process. As soon as the bombing stopped, hundreds of engineers and workers rushed to the scene with equipment already staged in underground bunkers. It was their intimate understanding of every detail in the system, a system designed by Americans, that helped them keep this lifeline from ever stopping. 22:6. The epic fury strategy. This lesson from the past sends a powerful message to Washington. In 2026, damaging Kharg is easy, but truly wiping out its oil export capability is a grueling and persistent war of attrition. As long as there is a spark of hope in this oil spout, Iran will fight to the end to keep the oil flowing, knowing that losing Kharg means losing the regime's existence. On the morning of March 14, 2026, U.S. Central Command CENTCOM issued an announcement that shocked the world. The U.S. military had officially opened fire on Kharg Island. This was no longer social media threats or posturing exercises. It was an operation codenamed Epic Fury. According to CENTCOM, American stealth aircraft and cruise missiles accurately struck 90 military targets on the island. These targets included naval mine storage facilities which Iran intended to use to blockade the Strait of Hormuz with ballistic missile silos buried deep within the rock. In an exclusive interview with NBC News immediately following the attack, President Donald Trump appeared with his characteristic confidence, making statements that left diplomats stunned. He confirmed that the U.S. had completely wiped out the military facilities on the island. But when a reporter asked why the oil and gas infrastructure remained intact, Trump replied with a purely pragmatic tone, "We have completely devastated military Kharg, and we could hit it a few more times for fun if needed. But as you see, I didn't do anything to the energy pipelines. Why? Because rebuilding those things would take years and billions of dollars. I don't want to destroy something that we might need later." This statement reflects an extremely sophisticated pruning tactic. He wants to strip Iran of its fangs, the military capability to threaten tankers while intentionally preserving the economic veins. Why would a president who always wants to apply maximum pressure preserve a revenue source for his enemy? The answer lies in the vision of a businessman doing geopolitics. Trump understands that if he shatters the oil tanks, he turns Iran into a cornered beast with nothing left to lose. When a nation has nothing left to lose, they do the craziest things. Conversely, by keeping the oil flowing even under control and sanctions, the U.S. retains a bargaining chip. Trump is sending a hidden message to Tehran. I have one, but I am leaving you a path back to the negotiating table. The ecological bomb and the $200 barrel lift. The U.S. truly shut off the Kharg tap forever. What would the real price be? Why not just send a few tomahawks to turn Kharg to ash? In the real world of geopolitics, the answer is one word: pragmatism. First, there is the ecological bomb. Kharg is not in the middle of a vast ocean like the Pacific. It is in a giant, shallow, and extremely sensitive pond, the Persian Gulf. If the U.S. bombed the massive storage tanks, tens of millions of barrels of crude oil would immediately spill. This wouldn't be an accident. It would be the largest oil spill disaster in human history, tens, even hundreds of times larger than the classic Exxon Valdez incident. Oceanographic models show that Persian Gulf currents would sweep this black tide straight toward the coasts of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Kuwait. These are not strangers. They are America's strategic allies and most important ATMs in the Middle East. The spill would paralyze desalination plants, the sole source of water for tens of millions of Arabs. Trump might want to punish Iran, but he cannot save oil prices by starving and dehydrating his own allies. That is a political price no U.S. president dares to pay. Second is the $200 a barrel shock. Trump is extremely sensitive to economic figures, especially gas price charts in battleground states like Pennsylvania or Michigan. Destroying Kharg would immediately evaporate over 2 million barrels of oil per day from the world market. In a global economy running on a razor's edge of supply and demand, this shortfall is like pulling the plug on a server running at full capacity. According to simulation scenarios from Bloomberg and Goldman Sachs, crude oil prices could surge to $150 or even $200 a barrel within 24 hours. For American voters, weekly gas bills often rank higher than distant Middle East disputes. A skyrocketing gallon of gas means exploding inflation and food prices. With public fury directed straight at the White House, Trump is pragmatic enough to know that burning Kharg is burning his own votes, the invisible blockade and the ghost fleet. Since they cannot bomb it, the U.S. has chosen a war without gunfire, where satellites and financial sanctions replace missiles. In 2026, the U.S. monitors every square meter of Kharg using a new generation of AI satellite systems. They don't need to fly low to count barrels. Algorithms can analyze the salinity of the seawater around a ship's hull or the ship's shadow to know exactly if it's full of oil or empty. Any ship daring to dock it, Kharg is immediately blacklisted by OFAC, Office of Foreign Assets Control. Once hit with this death sentence, the ship is effectively dead. It cannot buy insurance, cannot dock at any major port in the world, and its owner's assets in the international banking system are frozen. However, Iran is no amateur. They have become masters at bypassing laws with a network called the Ghost Fleet. This is an army of hundreds of aging tankers, over 20 years old in age, when they should be in a scrapyard. These ships have no Western insurance and frequently change their names and nationalities overnight. Their hurdle-jumping process plays out like an intelligence movie. Upon leaving Kharg, these ships turn off all eyes automatic identification system devices, making them invisible on maritime maps. They then meet buyer ships in deserted waters at midnight for ship-to-ship STS transfers. The oil from Kharg is poured into a clean vessel mixed with oil from legal sources, and finally flows to refineries in Asia under a perfect name. The Eurasian energy axis Kharg is no longer just a story between the U.S. and Iran. It is a link in a new global geopolitical game. To the east, China acts as a silent but powerful patron. Most of the oil leaving Kharg on stealth ships is destined for independent refineries in China's Shandong province. For Beijing, maintaining the oil flow from Iran is not just about cheap prices. It is an energy security strategy to counterbalance U.S. influence in the Middle East. If the U.S. collapses Kharg, they aren't just at war with Iran. They are indirectly attacking the energy lifeline of the world's second-largest economy. Furthermore, Russia, Iran, and China are gradually forming a trading system separate from the U.S. dollar. As the U.S. tightens financial sanctions, Iran has begun accepting payments in yuan or performing barter trades. This causes the US's strongest weapon, the SWIFT payment system, to lose its potency at this island. The final bargaining chip as of March 2026. Kharg stands as a testament to the limits of superpower authority. every barrel of oil leaving. The port is a reminder that the unipolar world is receding. The confrontation at Kharg is no longer a battle for terrain, but a contest of endurance. Iran is willing to suffer and sell oil at deep discounts, sometimes 20 to 30% below market price, to maintain the regime, while the U.S. must balance enforcing international law with maintaining the stability of its own voters. Wallett's Kharg is the convergence point of all these contradictions. It is both the most lucrative target and the most terrifying time bomb Washington faces. It proves that in this era, the most powerful weapon is not a missile, but interdependence. The Epic Fury campaign shows a new reality. Kharg is no longer a private matter between two countries, but a test for the entire world's energy flow. Iran's military leaders have issued a stark warning. If one drop of Iranian oil cannot flow to the world, then no drop of oil from this region will be allowed to leave port. This is the energy version of mutual assured destruction mad. Iran may not beat the US in a high-tech duel, but they are more than capable of dragging the entire world economy into the abyss with them. If Kharg is struck, Iranian cruise missiles and swarms of kamikaze UAVs will immediately target Abqaiq in Saudi Arabia, the world's largest oil processing plantor, LNG terminals in the UAE and Qatar. Conclusion: Kharg Island remains a special, hostile one that the enemy dares not wipe out and the owner will not abandon. Donald Trump, with his merchant mindset, has turned Kharg into a massive bargaining chip rather than a worthless pile of ashdod. What do you think of this gamble? Will the conflict end soon, and will oil prices return to the $70 mark? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you found this analysis helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.